Hi guys, this is Jackson Danny again. One of my users, subscribers, have asked me to expand on the subject of religion. One of my favorite subjects to talk about. Well, it used to be. These days, I prefer to talk about contrast and the idea of the yin and yang, because I feel as though it really does encapsulate or encompass all sciences that I'm familiar with, namely, we're talking about quantum physics, metaphysics, water pressure, mechanics, mathematics, science of music, science of motion, can be all governed and understood by the idea of the yin and yang or contrast. Really, all things in life they all have contrast. Even religion itself has contrast. So when you start to understand the bigger picture, you really truly can understand the sub-entities: religion, science, art, music, relationship within that sub-entity, because they follow the same rules, which are all governed by this idea called energy, right? But religion, I could really break it down from a perspective, because I was brought up a Buddhist. My parents they weren't devout Buddhist, but they were practicing Buddhists. Devout in the sense where they preached it everywhere they went. It wasn't anything like that. My parents practiced it from the perspective where there was a mantle, a shrine, if you will, sitting there, and they'd pray to it consistently, nightly, with incense having that burnt, and they believed that burning those incense would open up that gateway from them to the spiritual world, and that was what they were taught. But that's to the extent of what we practice, was that those rituals that were handed down to us. Never really questioned those rituals. That's the funny part about that. It was just practice what we were told and what they were told. So I was brought up into that religion, if you will, Buddhism. And later on in life, I not discovered Catholicism or Christianity. It was the influences of friends and schoolmates or whatnot who had brought Christianity and Catholicism into my life. And because I wanted so much to hang out and relate with them and other people, that I decided to join them for church festivities and gatherings and things of that nature. And I found it to be so enjoyable. Churches, those functions, and as well as these temple functions over at where people practice their Buddhism, Buddhist religion. So I realized that religion does a really good job of bringing people together. It was much like a huge festive purpose to bring people together on the idea of believing in something. So I like that a lot from a religious perspective, or the idea of religion. But the other half of the religion I thought was quite interesting was the other half that represented wisdom, knowledge, and the teachings of Golden Age rules that really stemmed from the idea and principle of treating other people like the way you want it to be treated. Treat others like the way you want to be treated, or do unto others as you would unto yourself, is an idea that also represents contrast. And to me, that is such a golden principle. It's such a timeless principle that a person can learn that anywhere in life, on the streets, in the slums, in the woods, virtually anywhere, and you do not need to be taught that specifically from any sector of religion to understand what it means. For instance, we were brought into this world, and from my understanding of the yin-yang, is as such, we were brought into this world very much holistic. Much like our energy before we were brought into this world was very much holistic. The minute we decide to engage in what we call physical life, we have allowed our energy to expand from a holistic to a divided sense. A holistic in the sense where we already understood and understand that all of who we are, all of who people are an extension of us. We are holistic. We can see life from our perspective. We too can also see life from other people's perspective, using the power of our imaginations. And we understand that people's imaginations or thoughts are from the perspective of us. They're one and the same. That's the whole idea of the Three Musketeers. We're one for all and all for one. Also, from a perspective that we were divided as life expands, as we chose this egoic or physical life, we chose to play into the expansion of life where we divide ourselves from a singular perspective into losing that idea that we are the other person. So we've moved away from holisticness into a divided and individualized, a unique perspective. Okay? And that's the other half of religion, which really pertains to this idea of treating other people like the way you want to be treated. Because the formula behind that is that people are you. Therefore, you treat them like the way you want to be treated. And the more you practice that people are you, you'll likely treat them more like the way you want to be treated. So to me, it can be simplified and deduced to that. And if you understand mathematics, you can truly understand religion from a mathematical standpoint or a scientific standpoint, a very relational, communicative standpoint, a artistic standpoint. There's a lot of different perspectives you can understand religion. Same idea with using religion to understand a lot of different perspectives, right? In mathematics, let's pretend all systems are whole numbers from 1 to infinity, okay? And all whole numbers has the component of the number 1, because 1 is divisible into all whole numbers, all right? So the idea of contrast is one that sits in every single system, every single whole number, okay? So if you understand that the idea of 1 is divisible into all things, and all you really have to understand is the number 1. Understand more of the number 1, and you'll understand what all the other whole numbers are all about, which represents every system in this world that you can imagine. Every single science, every single art, every single whether it's technical or non-technical, invisible or visible, you can begin or truly build a better understanding for systems. And that's what life's all about. And that's what, computing is all about, or our scientific world in a computer industry or engineering. You can understand really what electrical engineering is all about, the science of electricity without a need for understanding formulas and calculus or whatnot. You can understand water mechanics, pressure mechanics, gas mechanics. You can understand carpentry. You can understand wave motion. It's truly an endless amount of science. They all really stem from the same idea, but made more complicated by our not our educational system, by our minds, so to speak. As human beings, we can take things to a complicated level, really dilute the understanding of science from one perspective. Okay? So from a mathematical perspective, all you have to understand is that 1 is divisible into all things. And in energy, the same is true. All things are energy, and therefore energy is divisible into all things. And the same is true with religion. Treat others like the way you want to be treated is divisible into all religion. So I see it as whether it's Buddhist, Catholicism, or Christianity, or, if you were to believe in Allah, Middle Eastern teaching, that culture, the same teaching is true. On the flip side, all the other teaching that they have, to me, it's using symbolics or symbols and symbologies, using metaphors, analogies, is not necessary to teach people how to treat others. My idea of teaching people how to treat others like the way they want to be treated is go out there and make mistakes. But as you're making mistakes, understand it, because be understanding of it. Because a lot of people that make mistakes around me, I find that the more understanding I am of those mistakes, the easier it is for people to adopt and understand my mistakes. So the more I practice that, the more I can be in the mind zone, or a mental state, or have that mental capacity to understand and be understanding of people's mistakes. And the more I realize and live in that particular capacity, and live like that in understanding people's mistakes, the more I can see how mistakes and successes are the exact same idea. Your mistakes and failures are two sides of the globe, right? Where if you're on one side, you never be able to see the other side where it's darker. And if you're on the other side of the mistakes, or on the side of that globe, you'll see mistakes and you won't be able to see successes. And so therefore, you too are blinded from that sense. You don't have a holistic perspective. The more you practice this, the more enlightened you become, the more you get to see both sides or all sides of the globe, so that you can relate successes to failures and failures to successes, and how they too are one and the same, and really divide it from a singular perspective or a singular idea. Okay, I hope that helps you in understanding what religion is all about, and really do begin to see life from a more holistic perspective, a more patterned perspective, and, begin to really enjoy all of what life has to offer you, the good and also the bad. To me, the bad is just as enjoyable, and I've enjoyed learning from it vastly, that I want to urge people to start seeing mistakes as signs and symbols in their lives to learn from, as opposed to criticize, build negative energy from, and further alienate themselves from what life has to offer. Thank you for listening. And once again, I enjoyed your time.